Hello everyone, I'm Mike Brown. I'm really excited to be here today to talk to you about democratizing design and research. And in keeping with the game playing theme today, we're calling this sort of multiplayer mode. So there's my title slide. So I've been working in design for quite a while now. You can probably tell from my accent that I started my career in Australia. But pretty early on in my career, I started managing teams, and that's really something that I've sort of become quite passionate about. And once I moved to the UK, really what I've been involved in is sort of building and leading design organisations at large corporations like this, so sort of at BT and EE, Eurosport and Discovery, at Reed, and I've just recently started at Barclays. One thing that all these companies, or parts of companies, because most of these are really big corporations, one thing they all had in common when I started was that I'd say they had a low design maturity. It can be quite a controversial term, because I think some people find it quite patronising, but really what I mean by that is that in all these places there wasn't really a great understanding of the potential impact of design and what it could do for the business. There wasn't that much user research being done. When it was often using the wrong methodology, and really sort of major decisions, product decisions, were often just based on analytics only rather than sort of a wide range of insights, or even worse, just based on stakeholder opinions. And so, in short, in all these places, when I joined, design wasn't integrated fully into the fabric of the company. And why is that important? Well, there's a huge amount of information on online. You can see examples of companies that really have design at the basis and the fabric of what they do, and the success that they've been able to reap. Also, sort of great statistics about how investing in design and integrating design can do wonders for your business. I'll return to these figures again a bit later on. But one thing that's really interesting is McKinsey did a big study a few years ago where they looked at a huge range of companies, I think about sort of 40,000 companies, and they had a simple measure of strategic design. Just basically, did a design organisation exist, and was design being used strategically rather than just sort of something reactively? Pretty simple measures, but what they found is that the companies that were at this standard outperformed the rest of the market by 2 to 1. So it's a pretty basic measure, but it shows the overall impact to companies that prioritise design. So how can businesses unlock the value of design? Well, in my view, democratisation is the key. So keeping with the gaming theme, I'm going to talk about the game changer, which is democratising design in businesses, how democratising research can help you understand the game and make sure that you're solving the right problems. And then I'm going to give you some thoughts on how I think AI is really changing the game. So, starting with democratising design, at first I'd like everyone to help me out here a bit. Raise your hand if you've ever said or heard or experienced these statements before. So first of all, there isn't enough design resource. Has anyone ever sort of said or experienced this? Okay, I think most people in the business. And secondly, another thing, what does design actually do? Get this sort of all the time. Funnily enough, a lot of the time from people who've made big decisions about bringing in design, sort of paying for design, they still don't really understand. They know it's important, but what does it actually do? So I'm going to show you how properly democratising design can help to answer these problems. Yep. There we go. So a while back, I was starting to build up a team at BT, sort of quite a few years ago. It was a really exciting time. BT had never had an internal design organisation before. They'd always outsourced all the work to separate agencies, which you can imagine was quite fragmented. And we initially just started with a handful of high-performing designers, just handling sort of one part of BT's products and services. That went really well, and the team expanded quite quickly, but it was a team of real specialists. So we had sort of separate UX designers, visual designers, content designers, user researchers, all sort of working together, but as a separate studio, which then interfaced with the rest of the business whenever it was needed. This went really well, and in time, in a short period of time, the organisation expanded to then be owning everything across all of BT Consumer. So all the products and services, design was being handled. And so this was a really fast growth. It was really exciting. A lot of great work was being done, but it was quite inefficient as well. We weren't always delivering what was needed or in the right places. And then, in a short period of time after that, they brought together the entire digital organisations of BT and EE together into one new organisation, and at the same time went through a huge change. there'd been lots of different ways of working, but when they brought the two teams together, everyone in the entire organisation was moved into agile squads. It's a really exciting change, but it also meant for design, all these specialists, most of them were now just moved into one role, which was product design. And it was a very complicated process as well. So I'm not going to go into the detail here, but this just sort of shows all the steps we had just to build out one of these agile squads, to sort of understand what was needed and build one of these. And there were hundreds of these that were created. It was a really complicated time and process. A lot of training was needed, a lot of coaching. I was heavily involved in that from the design side. And it wasn't done overnight as well. There were a lot of lessons learned. What we started with wasn't what we kept going with. There were lots of changes being made. I understand that's still going on. The model is still being changed and improved now. But what we saw from the very start was that the results were dramatic. Once we moved into this new model, productivity increased by a huge amount. Suddenly actually having teams focused on solving the right problems meant that we could do a lot more and achieve a lot more. And in a pretty short period of time, we started to see some big jumps in some of our key metrics as well. So parts of the business that we'd struggled to make impact, struggled to improve things, they started to improve. And so really what that showed to me is that, and it's something that I've taken with me in every company and team that I've built ever since then, is that embedding design is the key. So rather than having design as a separate function, which interfaces with the company that way, what's really important is that design should be actually working within teams. And I'm just going to run through a few of the things that I think are really important when you do it that way. And this really answers that problem of not enough design resource. So cross-functional teams are key. So with us, we'd always talked about sort of embedded product teams, but it can really be sort of for, it doesn't have to be restricted just to product. This can sort of really, I believe, this can have success in almost every part of a business. But what's really important is that the designers who are in my team, that is when they're in these cross-functional team, that is their team. That's their day-to-day team. That's the one they'll be having all the meetings with, the daily meetings or the weekly ceremonies. They might be part of a wider design organisation, which I run, but their team is their cross-functional team, all working from one roadmap and backlog. And when we brought this in, it's something that, as I said, sort of as I've come into new organisations, I found this isn't usually the case when I've come in. As we push for that, you start to see immediate changes. We've found that sort of having that closer working relationship, making sure that design and research are at the forefront, has led to some really big increases. And I've seen at multiple places, big increases in conversion in the key measures, up to sort of 30% in some cases. And that's just from making these small changes at the start. And it's important to emphasise it's not just for product as well. In one of my previous roles, I came in, inherited a big sort of product design, a relatively big product design organisation, worked at embedding all the product designers there. But we also had a close relationship with marketing, where whenever marketing needed any design resource sort of output, they would come to our organisation, we'd help them out. This is obviously sort of very inefficient because the product designers have to stop what they're doing, change context. We'd never have the same people working on things. But I really loved this relationship because it meant that we were collaborating closely with marketing, and also we could have an oversight of making design consistent across the whole business rather than having a separate marketing design team. So won some budget just to hire a couple of key roles to work full-time in the marketing department. What that did is that just by hiring sort of a couple of people, putting them in the right place, working 100% of their time with the marketing team, we increased the output, what we were able to do, by over 5 times. Empowerment is really key as well. So when you move people into embedded teams, embedded cross-functional teams, it's really important they're empowered to do the right work. Are they given problems to solve, or are they just being given solutions to execute? And do they have all the resources they need? Do they actually have everyone in the team that they need to do the work? And finally, I think it is really important as well that they're accountable for their outcomes. I'm often asked for specific design measures, which are really important. It's something that we should be measuring all the time. But for those particular teams, what they should be accountable for is the team outcomes and the team measures. When you empower teams, what it can actually do is it can create new silos. So you've broken down the barriers between the different parts of the business working together. They're doing great work together. But what you can find is that actually now you've got these empowered teams, all with their different goals, different pieces of work that they're doing. This can create new silos, and it's really important as leaders and organisers to make sure that you're breaking down these silos, that you're putting in place opportunities for people to talk, opportunities for people to work together, because it can have really drastic consequences. One of my previous organisations, it was a two-sided marketplace where it'd have two quite discrete parts of the business, still connected but work quite separately. On one side of the business, when we were working in this model, the team made some fantastic interventions based on some really good user research and managed to moved their key measures up by a huge amount. I think it was over 40%, which was bringing huge revenue in for the company. What we didn't realise is on the other side of the business, this started to affect a really key revenue driver, which went down over a slow period of time. This wasn't picked up until a significant amount of time later. It took a lot of work, a lot of heartache, a lot of recriminations to fix everything and get things in place. This could have all been avoided if there'd been more communication from the start and more understanding of what each team was doing. And so that's what understanding design, not just design itself, but what does design actually do? That's why it's so important. So returning to strategic design, so obviously it's really important to have design as part of your business, have practitioners in the business who are designers and leadership of design as well. But more than that, it's really important that they're not just an execution service, but that they're actually involved in the strategy from the start. The design is understood and it's involved at every step of the process. And that's what we mean by strategic design, and that's where businesses can really start to reap the benefits that we're talking about. Communication is really key as well. So I've always felt that design and research results should be transparent and accessible. This makes such a difference to the understanding of design when people are seeing things all the time. Figma's fantastic for if anyone's using that. When it can be set up properly, it means that across the business, people can see not just the end results, not just the finished design, but they can actually see the process of design being created and all the steps as that's going through. That can be nerve-wracking for some designers, but it's so important for the understanding of design and the acceptance of it as well. And it's also, my teams always take every opportunity to share and present design and research results. This helps people to understand what we do, because often when I get that question from stakeholders, so what's design actually doing? Usually it's an anxiety over not seeing the design decisions and outputs. They don't really understand what's being done. When design's constantly being shared and constantly being seen and the process is constantly being seen, it removes this anxiety and it builds up that credibility, that trust, and that wider knowledge, which is so important. And a big part of building that up is doing the right amount of research to ensure that you're solving the right problems. So now talking about democratising research. Again, I'll ask everyone to put their hands up if they've heard this. So has anyone experienced this? We'd like to do some research, but we don't have enough researchers. There's not sort of the research capacity. So, okay, quite a few people. Another one which is really important, what's the value of user research? Why should we put budget towards this? Has anyone experienced this or said this? I imagine there's probably quite a few people in the audience saying this. So again, I'm going to show you how my teams answer these common issues. So my teams always use a wide variety of methodologies to understand what our users need, both qualitative and quantitative. But qualitative research is always a big part, and it's something that sort of design and research teams would normally lead on. And for a long time, sort of much earlier in my career, it always looked like this. So when we needed to do some user research, generally hire a lab, then dedicated user researchers would come in and conduct and moderate the research. It was a very comfortable way to work. We could bring lots of stakeholders in. Everyone could. It was a very inclusive way to sort of do our research within the business, but it was quite inefficient in terms of cost, having to hire labs, and also the admin of getting everyone sort of travelling, doing all these kind of things. But this was generally the way that we worked. Then in early 2020, COVID happened and upended the whole process. Suddenly we couldn't do any research in this way. So my teams, and I'm sure most of the world, moved to 100% remote testing. We've always used, in sort of multiple stops now, user Zoom, which is now part of user testing, and sort of assessed this at various places, always found it to be the best in class. And moving to this model full time, with sort of doing all the research remotely, that really sort of had huge benefits, obviously, sort of in cost, time, convenience. We could do a lot more research. And we've never really looked back. I still sort of have budget set aside to do lab research if we needed to, but I found that when I ask my researchers, it's not what they want to do anymore. They feel they're getting all that they need from the remote research. We tend to use that budget for other different types of research now. But research was still really hard. What we found is that when we had sort of dedicated researchers doing the work, there were never enough researchers for everything we needed to do. The researchers became bottlenecks through no fault of their own. They were always having to switch context, having to learn and keep up to date with all the different product areas. So I knew that this could be better, and when I started in a new role, I set about ensuring that we could democratise research to be able to do much more. It's important at this point to define what I mean by democratising research. And this is to answer that question of not enough researchers. So this is not a case of just giving out the tools and a few guidelines and letting people go wild, because I think that's sort of one way that you can democratise things, but it's not the way that we've driven the best results. Because for us, what's important is that the product teams themselves plan and conduct the research rather than dedicated researchers. But there are still specialists within the organisation. There are still experts who are there to facilitate and support, to help maintain high standards, and also support the teams with anything they need. And it would differ depending on the experience within the team. But what that also does is that frees up a lot of capacity from the researchers, so then they can take on the larger strategic pieces which the business needs. When we adopted this at a previous company, what we found is year on year, the amount of research that we could complete went up by 1,300%. There's obviously a huge increase with really tangible value in terms of customer data and the insights that we could gather. We achieved this with, in the first year, with sort of pretty strict targets for across the whole company. So got this into the whole company OKRs to ensure that each part of the business had targets on how many insights they were gathering, how much research they could do. What we found is that was only needed in the first year. Once everyone understood this cadence and became used to research and insights and user data informing everything that we did, that could carry on the next year without any need for any sort of further targets. But it's not enough just to do the research. How do you demonstrate the value of user research? How do you sort of answer this question if people are reluctant to give up the budget? Returning to the statistics I was showing before, there's a lot of information out there about how important UX is, how important user research is, and how much value that can drive for a company. But what I've found over and over again is that stakeholders are influenced by this, but what they really want to know is something tangible about their company. What's the research that you're doing? How is this affecting what we're doing? How can you show the value to what we're doing? The problem is that to really show the value of this, you have to do a lot of research. You have to actually really understand your users and then establish the right metrics to show the success that you're having, which is fine if you have the time and the resources to do it, but what if you're at the start? What if you're trying to expand the amount of research that you're doing and you need to show the value of that? What I've found is very persuasive is actually looking at it from the opposite direction. So actually looking at the negative results of research, the things that we got wrong, rather than concentrating on the positive. Because failures in user research can be very powerful and they can be quantified. And that way you can show how every piece of user research actually reduces risk for the company, and you can sort of put that into financial terms. To take just one example, the company I was working at, we had multiple suggestions from users, people sort of writing into us in various formats, suggesting a certain feature, which sounded like a great idea. It seemed to make a lot of sense. The team was ready to go ahead and start developing and building it, but we sort of argued and negotiated to do one day of user testing, just with a few users. What we found is that when we sort of prototyped and built this feature and put it out there, no one used it because it didn't actually answer their underlying need. It didn't answer the problem that they were having. We'd even sort of managed to track down one of the people who'd suggested the feature, and when we tested it, they didn't use the feature either. So if we'd gone ahead and built this, it would have taken 10 times the amount of labour, just in terms of sort of the developers, testers, product people to do that. One day of testing, remove that. We find these examples almost every time that we test. So my teams always track all the hypotheses that we have from all around the business at the start, and then we report back on them at the end. So we're constantly reinforcing the value. And just quickly, it can get even worse if you go through to launching things. A report from IBM highlighted the cost to fix an error after something has gone live is 100 times what it would cost if you'd fixed that during the design phase. So it can get even worse if you're putting these things live and trying to learn that way. So finally, I know I'm running a bit over time here. Well, not over time yet, but almost. I just want to talk to you about how I think the game is changing with AI. So only one question here. Has anyone sort of heard or said or experienced this statement? AI is going to take our jobs. I'm hearing this sort of everywhere, this common complaint, all over LinkedIn and through the media, but I actually think the truth is closer to this. You won't lose your job to AI, but you will to someone who uses AI better than you do. So this is a quote from Jakob Nielsen, sort of one of the godfathers of UX and user experience design, who, like myself, is very bullish on AI, and he thinks that it's going to have a huge positive effect on not just design, but almost everything that we do. And the reasons for that are quite clear. It's really early days. There aren't that many studies yet. People haven't been using it. But from the studies that we have, from the work that we've done, we've found that AI improves employee productivity by around 66%. And all the estimates are that it's going to add huge amounts to the worldwide economy and to everything that we all do. And when I look across my design team now, it's inevitable. I have a team of largely learning designers now working closely in content, delivering content to the whole of Barclays. It's inevitable that almost every part of our design workflow will be using AI, will have it integrated in some way in the future. The tricky thing is when, because it's evolving. We're not able to use it for all parts of the process yet, but at some stage we will. We're already running tests, and I've sort of found in this company and in previous ones as well, seen really big results in using AI right now for certain parts of the process. So for things like user research analysis, integrating AI can take a task which used to take days down to hours. Anything, my teams work a lot with copy and sort of working with stakeholders on copy. There's so many tasks which all the sort of headline AI tools can really help with. Things like sort of summarizing copy, changing microcopy. When those things are used effectively, it can be a huge time saver. And so I think that to return to the question before and the problem that everyone has worrying that AI is going to take our jobs, I think that comes from the fear of automation. When in reality, it's actually, I think that rather than automating, AI is going to help us augment. Because I'm yet to see any AI output that we can trust 100% at this stage. There have to be humans involved to be checking the outputs, sort of editing, improving, and I think that will continue for a very long time. But what that does mean is that process of us working with AI frees up a huge amount of time and makes people vastly more productive. And I personally have big plans for my team to use this extra time and productivity gains to be able to increase their skills and deliver much more value across wider areas of the journeys that we work in. Right now, my teams are quite concentrated in certain areas. I think with the expansion of skills and the time that they will have, how productive they can be, we can be delivering value much more widely. So I think it's a really exciting time, and I think for everyone here, anyone basically who works on a computer in the digital realm at the moment, I think the time for engagement on AI is now. So just want to leave you with the key takeaways. So I think that first one, sort of cross-functional empowered teams. Through democratization, you can really deliver the capabilities, deliver the best, most efficient outcomes. Democratization will allow you to do continuous research and discovery, and this really helps companies to understand value and solve the right problems. And lastly, the time to start implementing AI is now, so that your companies can harness productivity gains and plan for an AI-augmented future. Thanks very much.